This is the JE Podcast, brought to you by Philadelphia Jewish Exponent and its parent company, Mid-Atlantic Media. Welcome to the Jewish Exponent Podcast. I am your host, Jared Safran. I am here today with the American Jewish Committee's Africa Institute Director, WayneSussman. Wayne, you're in Philadelphia right now. Thank you for joining us via Zoom. Appreciate it.
Jared, it's great to be speaking to you and the Jewish Exponent, and it's great to be in the city of brotherly love, Philadelphia. Thank you so much for this invitation.
I hope you felt that brotherly love during your time here.
Well, the sun is out. It hasn't been out on this entire trip, so I am feeling
Very
that
nice.
Brotherly love.
Yeah, it's like 64 degrees today. Okay, so what I want to discuss with you, Wayne, is something that I'm not sure if our audience knows a lot about it. It's a less discussed part of world Jewry, but you cover Africa, South Africa, Africa. So what should Jews in the Philadelphia area, Jews in America in general, know about Jewry in Africa?
Great. So the overwhelming amount of Jews in Africa today are in the southern tip of the continent in South Africa, which I think we're going to speak more about later. Mm-hmm. Historically, there were big Jewish communities, Sephardic communities in northern parts of Africa. Right. A few days ago, I had the privilege of being in Casablanca, Morocco, and I visited the Jewish Museum, which tells the rich story of Moroccan Jewish history. There's still 3,000 Jews in Morocco today, but the community is a shadow of its former self. Yeah. Even though, by the way, it's a very important point, this. In the Moroccan, I think it's called the Moroccan Constitution, or their preamble about Moroccan identity, they say, yes, the majority of the country is Arab. Yes, the majority of the country is Muslim, but there is a rich Berber tradition, a rich African tradition, and a rich Jewish tradition. And this is proclaimed by the king, where they realize that Jews played an integral role in a country like Morocco. And you see that the king there provides funding for some of the old synagogues and the old cemeteries, and there's this new museum. If we go back closer to South Africa, I remember growing up, I grew up, of course, in South Africa, and I used to go to summer camp when particularly when I was 12, 13 years old. One of my highlights would be meeting the kids who came from Zimbabwe, which is just north of South Africa on the border there. The community there was a few thousand people. Today, it's a handful of souls. There was political upheaval in Zimbabwe. There was land expropriation, and a lot of that community fled to South Africa and to other parts of the world. If you had to go to Namibia, and Jared, I hope you don't mind this tour, we'll do a quick tour through Africa. But if you had to go to Namibia, which is also, you could say, north of South Africa, a very large country, one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. And you had to open the phone book. Do you remember phone books, Jared?
A little bit.
Okay, so these were big things before the cell phones, where if you had to look up the Safran family name and you had to call Jared Safran, that's where you'd find the number. Right. I remember going there in 1999, and I opened up the phone book, and there was a family, Pupkowitz, a nice, strange surname, and they dominated the phone book because of all their business interests, a remarkably successful family. But there, the community is also very, very small. If we had to go through other parts of Southern Africa, places like Botswana, there's a very small community today. It's sadly smaller. Eswatini, which is formerly Swaziland, had a fascinating individual who was an African gentleman who became actually a rabbi. So in all these small communities, there were pockets. What's interesting is that if one goes to the center of Africa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the DRC, one of the largest countries in Africa, there was a strong migration from the island of Rhodes in Greece to the Democratic Republic of Congo, to a place called Elizabethville, which is Lubumbashi today. And they brought their Sephardic traditions with them. They built a new community there. There was a lot of success there, but there was political upheaval there, which is a story across the African continent. There was migration to South Africa. So today, I mean, I spoke about Morocco and South Africa. I was recently in Kenya. There is a Jewish community there which gathers for Friday night services. There was never, this is a newer community because of economic opportunities in Kenya. Other parts of North Africa, there would have been a community. Now, what's really might be interesting for your listeners and viewers is Uganda, which is in East Africa. And the Abu Yadaya people, which have been recognized, my understanding is, by the conservative denomination. And these are Jews in rural Uganda. You know, the Jewish community today is a very urban population. These are Jews in rural Uganda who've held fast onto their customs for many, many, many generations. And the conservative denomination have recognized them as Jewish, very, very small. So one of the things we do at American Jewish Committee with our partners in Morocco, the Mamouna organization, is we have an African Jewish conference where we, and I use this word in, I think in a fair term, all these disparate communities together. Just very quickly on that, my final point is, I just went to, and whenever I do presentations on Africa, I don't have it here, I have my map of Africa because there are 54 countries on the African continent. I went to the island of Cabo Verde, Cape Verde, for the Cape Verde Jewish Heritage Project, where they rededicated the Jewish cemetery with funding from the Moroccan king, a remarkable person, Carol Castile, who you should have on your show one time. And she, there were Portuguese migrants to that island, and 11 Jews are buried in that cemetery. So it's not large numbers. It's barely a million. It is a million. But Jews across Africa have touched many of the most unlikely spots. It's fascinating.
What are the Jewish communities like there? Are they Orthodox, conservative, reform? Are there no denominations? What is kind of the shape of them there? Because we know in the US it takes many forms. In Israel, it takes a variety of forms as well. What about in Africa?
So Kenya and Zimbabwe will be traditional. Morocco will be traditional. One of the unique features of South African Judaism, it's changed a bit. And I know it really bemuses people when they come, is to find that Orthodox synagogues have parking lots. And that's essentially, it's changed a bit because some of the communities become more religious.
Yeah.
But traditional, you drive to Shul on Friday night, go home for dinner, possibly keep kosher in the home, possibly not mix milk and meat in the home, not eat pork in the home, or at all. So traditional, essentially, but South Africa is very different to the United States of America. The overwhelming amount of Jews, particularly in Johannesburg, are Orthodox Jews. But again, it's not the religious community has grown, and the Haredi, the ultra-Orthodox community has grown. But majority of the community is still traditional. Their children will have Orthodox bar mitzvahs. Their children will have Orthodox weddings. Sadly, when they pass, they'll have Orthodox funerals and a funeral conducted by an Orthodox rabbi. Cape Town's somewhat different. There, the Reform community or the progressive community is growing. It's a big portion of the community there. We have a lot of Jewish day schools in South Africa. These are schools which have become more religious rather than less religious over the last few years. And there's, again, they use the term national, traditional, or national religious, which is like Orthodox, strong links to the state of Israel. And yeah, those are some of the uniqueness of South Africa. So the conservative Jewish community, there's a tiny synagogue in Johannesburg, but this is more out of we call it a faribble in South Africa, a schism in the Reform community. It's absolutely tiny. So that is how I define the community.
Mm-hmm. Are there a lot of Jewish cultural institutions there as well, like camps and schools and others?
It's a great question. I'm a product of a summer camp. I'm the president of one of the Jewish youth organizations today. The South African Jewish community has historically and today is a very strong community. Also, if you look around the world, a lot of the people leading community organizations have their roots in South Africa. A great proportion, a great percentage of those were leaders of Jewish youth movements. And I think it's created this kind of civic responsibility. And what's unique about South Africa is, from my limited understanding of American summer camps, is historically it's a bit less competitive today. But there's a lot of internal competition between the youth organizations where they really try to compete for every heart and soul because they want those kids to come to the Jewish summer camp. So I think that healthy rivalry has resulted in movements and camps being a core future of the community life. What's also very different today is that there's a great proportion of the kids go to Jewish day schools. This has climbed tremendously in the last few years, particularly in Johannesburg and Cape Town. We have organizations like the South African Jewish Board of Deputies and the Zionist Federation, organizations like Limud, women's organizations, student organizations. What we don't really have, old age homes, by the way, that's another strong feature of the community. Community security organizations. In Johannesburg, there's a private Hatsola, private ambulance and medical response. What we don't really have, I'm going to get to that now. We have the Chevra Kadisha. So, for instance, indigent people, people who battle to make ends meet are well looked after. Finally, what we don't really have are like JCCs. I think that arts and culture isn't sadly a priority, even though I think it's the hallmark of a great community is that we have a thriving Jewish arts and culture. So those are the two things absent of South African Jewish community. They have arts and culture. I mean, there's a strong Yiddish tradition in South Africa historically. I mean, my wife sings in Yiddish. But today, there's very little arts and culture on a regular basis, but there's never ever been the concept of a JCC, a Jewish Community Center in South Africa.
Yeah. So I also wanted to have you on today to discuss the situation between South Africa and Israel. The government of South Africa is, of course, the one that is bringing the lawsuit against Israel, accusing it of genocide for the International Criminal Court. What do you and the American Jewish community do to try to combat that lawsuit and that perception?
Yeah, AJC cares deeply about the South African Jewish community and its success. It's by far the largest community in Africa, but it's incomparable. Right now, that community is feeling extremely vulnerable. It's feeling that its government has let it down, that by taking Israel to the ICJ, that the community has been felt left alone. There was also the incident with David Teager. I know I'm speaking to an audience which loves baseball. We love cricket in South Africa. It was the Under-19 World Cup. There was a kid, David Teager, an Orthodox Jewish child. He didn't go to a Jewish school. He was going to be the captain of that cricket team. He was removed from being the captain because of his pro-Israel utterances soon after October the 7th, where people he knew personally were either injured or kidnapped. And a commission of inquiry cleared David Teager. But then what we understand is that a very senior person in the government or the governing party insisted that he got removed again, even though he was cleared. So things like that, the International Court of Justice application, the treatment of David Teager, the lack of support or outreach from the South African government immediately after October the 7th really affected the community. And the community is incredibly vulnerable right now. In its peak, South Africa had 120,000 Jews. It's down to 50,000 Jews today. And this is a hammer blow that if Jews in South Africa feel that the government doesn't can't empathize with this pain after October the 7th, can't understand that Israel has the right and ability to defend itself. This is a low point for the community, and the AJC will work with the South African Jewish community in helping give it support, access to partners and allies around the world, which can strengthen its position during this difficult time.
Now, there was an article that came out today in Jewish Insider. The chief rabbi of South Africa, Warren Goldstein, made an address at the APAC conference, and he said that anti-Semitism and anti-Israel sentiment are not widespread among the South African public. He said rather they are driven by the ruling African National Congress. He said further that South Africa has low rates of anti-Semitic incidents in its society at large. Hostile government, welcoming people was how he put it. He also said that Israel is not really an electoral or political issue in South Africa. On the contrary, he cited polling suggesting that the ICJ case might be politically damaging to the South African government, and it has, quote, no mandate from the public for pursuing the prosecution. So have you found this divide to be the case as well?
I think the chief rabbi is correct. And by the way, it's a unique, I don't think America certainly doesn't have that. It's a Commonwealth position. Britain has a chief rabbi. So he is correct.
I think America
and it's from the Orthodox community. He is correct that anti-Semitism in South Africa is, so first of all, it's up significantly, and I'm very grateful for this. It's off an extremely low base. I have the privilege of having traveled quite widely across the great United States of America. What one sees on campuses, what one sees in urban areas has been incredibly difficult for the Jewish community. It hasn't really been the case in South Africa, and long may that last. There's one unfortunate attack on a religious Jew, one other attack. What did worry me was the boycott of Jewish businesses, particularly small businesses which didn't have the capital to withstand those boycotts. I know of about 2 businesses, I think, which closed down. Some prominent businesses were targeted. This was very, very unfortunate. But the chief rabbi is correct. I think the majority of South Africans are more interested in domestic matters, more interested in domestic issues. But we have an election coming up. That election will be on the 29th of May. And I think the government did this because they believe in this. The majority of them have historically close ties with the Palestinians. But I think what further motivated them was they believed that they could win back lost voters who are either not interested in voting for them anymore because they felt that the party had let them down, or that the party no longer represented them. We have 3 significant urban provinces in South Africa. One of those is the Western Cape, which includes Cape Town, one of the most beautiful cities in the world, also where the famous winelands are. It has a strong Muslim community, and that community is, of course, upset at what has gone on in Gaza. And I think the ANC and the government sees an opportunity there to win back some of those voters who now vote for the opposition. It remains to be seen. I don't think there's a negative for I disagree with the chief rabbi there. I did see that poll, but I don't think it's a negative for the ANC to focus on it. But it suits them to focus on it because it prevents them, it allows them to not focus on domestic issues. There are tremendous domestic challenges in the country right now. One of the highest youth unemployment rates in the world. Infrastructure is crumbling. We have this concept of load shedding, where we're without electricity for many hours of the day. This affects poor people more than rich people, because rich people can have generators or solar panels which means for poor people that they're paying more for their food because their food goes off if the power's off. The crime rate is up. The economy is hardly growing. So South Africa is in a very difficult position. And by focusing, again, I don't just think it's for completely cynical reasons. I think there's a belief in it, but also I think that they're hoping for an electoral benefit, and what remains to be seen. We'll know it in just over 2 months' time.
So is there hope for the future for Jewry in this country, or do you think it comes down to this election? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, my wife, live there with my wife and 2 kids. All my brothers live overseas. All my brothers-in-law live overseas. A great deal of my friends have immigrated, but it's still a remarkable community. Has to be a resilient community, particularly after what it's endured since October the 7th. But it's going to be challenging. I see young Jewish talent still will continue to be poached, will get opportunities to study overseas or work overseas.
Yeah.
I think people who have the ways and means will see if they can go live elsewhere.
Yeah.
And what we don't want is to be left with with a community which is much older. Nothing wrong against old people, but we want diversity in the age spread. And so it's a tough time. But again, the country has tremendous natural beauty. As the chief rabbi said in that article, the people in South Africa are by and large incredible people.
Yeah.
Across the board, the different faith groups, the different people. But it's going to be a difficult ride. There are those who care for me who say, Wayne, it's time to go, but I'm not packing it in yet. I'm going to work to a better community and a better country.
WayneSussman, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.